What's up, everybody? I'm really excited because I'm starting this series about the more abstract concepts in life, things that I wish somebody had taught me when I was much younger, because then it would have given me a better understanding of how the world really works and how to kind of gain more control over my environment, right? So today I'm going to be talking to you about preconceptions, and the premise of this episode is about the abstract concept of preconceptions, and specifically how you can change the way that you're thinking to bring success and change into your life. And I personally believe that this is absolutely the fastest way to change your life, specifically by challenging all of your preconceptions. So what this means is, one, we have to identify what preconceptions are, and then two, I have to explain to you why the act of challenging them changes your life drastically, okay? So first, let's talk about preconceptions. A preconception is a perception that you have about something without any experience in the subject. Imagine that you have a friend, and your friend's like, oh man, this guy Joe, I really just don't like him. You now have a preconception of Joe, provided that you've never actually met Joe in person. If you know Joe and you've interacted with him, then you don't have a preconception. You have an actual concept, an actual conception. A preconception is how you feel about something that you have not tried or have not done or have not participated in. So most of your perception of the world is preconceptions. And that's just because of what happens to a human as we grow up. As we come into the world, and it's all about replication. It's all about hearing the adults that you respect and hearing their opinions and wanting to regurgitate them and be like them because you want to be like them and not be like the ones you don't like. It's all about this kind of regurgitation over time, right? In that very nature, we are very, very prone to having way more thoughts about things than we do experiences with things, okay? So preconceptions, it's really important that you understand exactly what they are so that you can understand how to go about challenging them, and then, so ultimately, you can understand why the act of challenging your preconceptions almost assures that your quality of life greatly improves, okay? And I'm not saying this happens overnight. It definitely takes a year or two. But if you integrate these changes into the way that you think, you will get results, all right? We'll get more into that in a bit. I still need to make sure that you understand what a preconception is, because you have them, we have them, all people have them, okay? But not a lot of people talk about it or necessarily really understand what a preconception is and why they're so inherently dangerous, right? Because we come into the world and the world's really dangerous and we got to learn from other people's mistakes so that we don't die, so that we have shelter and all that kind of stuff, right? We got to learn from all the humans before us so that we are able to function, right? That in its nature, you have to rely on preconceptions. You have to rely on other people's experiences of something, because you don't want to lose a limb. You don't want to die. So you have to trust what other people went through and learn from them, right? But the reality is that the internet completely changed humanity. And most of our world that we exist in now it's still transitioning into this new change, right? But most of the educators and our parents in particular, for the younger of us, they were raised in a world that was different. And I'm not saying that the world's better or that humans are just better or anything like that. My point is just that you cannot comprehend, none of us can comprehend how exponentially the internet changed humanity. I now have access to any individual on the entire planet. I can learn anything that I want from a computer. I don't have to leave my house, and I can learn hundreds of different ways to run profitable businesses. I can study anything online. I have unlimited access to information. And all humans do as well. Anybody with an internet connection has unlimited access to information. That has never, ever, ever, ever happened in the course of humanity. We've had times where, like, people had access to libraries, but the reality is that the experience of being a human and the things that you have access to nowadays is, you can't even compare it to most of humanity's existence. And that's why I'm talking to you about preconceptions, because there is this concept of things that for most of humanity's existence, it was really important to listen to, because you really couldn't trust a lot of people, and you really couldn't put yourself out there because you could get killed. Like, I'm doing a video talking about how I feel about this. Nobody's gonna kill me. I'm gonna be okay. That is really weird and unusual in the course of human history. That was not a thing for ages. And that's what I'm saying. Times changed. And most people that I know still live their life based on the preconceptions that they have about things that they haven't experienced. They live their lives filled with fear about what can go wrong and how they have to make the right decisions now so that they are happy in the future. But the reality is, if you do what society tells you is the best, that's not what's the best anymore. And the reality is that you might not be able to find a job. You might not have retirement. You might not be able to find any of this. And the things that used to give you almost guaranteed security do not offer that level of security anymore. You have to think modernly. You have to look at it from the new age perspective to really understand how to make the best in this world based on what information and lifestyles we currently have access to, right? So I think now I've really covered what a preconception is, and I've gotten a little bit into why they're so relevant, especially to people who are alive right now. It's going to be less relevant in like a couple hundred years, right? But this point right now, where the internet is still a relatively new thing, and we have just begun to experience what that changes, right? Because the internet effectively gave humanity a hive mind, which is absolutely insane. Like, if you can, I could talk about the complications of that for forever. So I'm not going to get into that, because now I've blabbered on about preconceptions, and I need to help you figure out how to identify when you have a preconception and give you a mechanism to challenge that preconception. Okay? So the best way to identify that you have a preconception is, honestly, if you have a negative thought about something, you have a negative thought about hanging out with somebody, you feel like it's going to be boring, or you are hesitant to try a new thing because you think that you won't like it. Basically, if it's a new experience followed by a negative initial reaction, it's a preconception, almost guaranteed. And you may like to think that most of those experiences are right, like most of the time you don't want to try something, it's because you know that you're not going to like it. You can tell yourself that, and that's great. You could live in that world for the rest of your life. The reality is you are going to be wrong most of the time. Your preconceptions are usually wrong, and you can count on that. You can count that if you think that something is going to be unpleasant, or if it's a new experience, you can count on that the only reason you think that is because at some point in your life you heard somebody say something bad about it. And the reality is more people share shitty stuff than good things. So most of your preconceptions are going to be negative. They're not going to encourage you to try new things, right? So what you need to do is learn to identify when this is happening. You have to identify in your head when you are hesitant to do something new, whether that's interact with a new person, or interact with a stranger, or try a new food, or try an activity that you feel judgmental about, that you feel hesitant about, that you can't imagine how it could possibly be fun. All of these things are really common preconceptions. And the reality is that if you want to be successful, or if you want to be happy, either way, you have to challenge all of your preconceptions, because your preconceptions will give you a depressed, boring, monotonous life. They will always choose the average thing instead of the thing that will make you happy. So what you have to do is just get used to challenging them constantly. Like, I have all day to do stuff, right? And that sounds great. The reality is, if I didn't challenge my preconceptions, I would stay in bed and eat and play a game and be really depressed. And that is all I would do with my life. And it would be horrible. And there were periods of my life that it was like that. Because I didn't understand that it's not about just doing what you want. It's about understanding that you have to be able to do things that you are interested in. Even though you're going to lose interest, you have to be able to be willing to expose yourself to the scenario anyway. Because at some point you were interested in it. So just go with it. Just do it. Just put yourself out there. And honestly, what this boils into is managing your perceptions. And that is something that I will also share in another episode of this series about these abstract concepts that you can use to change the way that you think and the way that you live your life, and ultimately to change the quality of your life. This is the kind of stuff that a lot of people will consider wishy-washy. It's very much the kind of stuff that of my audience, only a very small fraction of you will even have gotten to this point on this video. So like, I know that these videos won't be super popular, and that's okay. Because I think that if somebody had shared these concepts with me when I was younger, or like 4 or 5 years ago, it would have helped me kind of prevent some problems in my life, mostly with me beating myself up. There were a lot of times where I was doing what was best for me and what was best for my development as an individual. But because other people didn't perceive it that way, I doubted myself and I started to wonder. If they were right. Maybe I am stupid. Maybe I am being incredibly risky and dumb and it's never going to work. Those are all insecurities that I dealt with, right? But the reality is, whenever you hear someone's opinion about you, you have to think of their lifestyle. Do you want to live how that person lives? Then listen to their advice. But if they have a life that you wouldn't be happy living, just be polite. Listen, but, you don't have to do it. And honestly, the only person who knows what's best for you is you. And that's why I don't do like courses and videos that show exactly step by step how to do like long drawn out processes, because I believe that in order to really make a difference in somebody's life, you have to show them how to do that for themselves. Like, you have to understand that you are the only one who can really change your life. You can't let life just happen to you. You have to take control of your environment. It's you, right? So I'll see you next time, guys. I'm not sure when I'll do the next episode of this, but it'll be about how to manage your perceptions of the world, right? And this is a bit kind of dark artsy, because some people will think that I'm crazy for sharing the stuff that I'm sharing. They literally, I know people who think that I am crazy for doing these things to my head. Like, there are scenarios where I can't do anything about something, so I do everything that I can to retain an ignorance about it, because there's nothing that I can do, right? Whereas most people are like, no, you got to educate yourself. You got to be aware of all that. So it's situational, Like, you have to think about the net effect on your mind, your emotions, and your learning, right? There's a much bigger picture going on. All right, guys. See you next time. Ciao.